This episode of the Golf Gambling Podcast and the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is presented by WynnBET. WynnBET is now live in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Louisiana, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Tennessee, and Virginia. From boosted same-game parlays to live in-game odds, WynnBET is what you need to win. Sign up today, bet $100 and get $100 at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WynnBET. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WYNNBET. State restrictions apply. All right, DJs, welcome back to the Golf Gambling Podcast. I am riding solo. If you're watching on YouTube or listening to this later, it's just me today. Boston Capper is currently doing I think a beer mile run. He was saying this for the past couple of months. Apparently, I guess every quarter mile he's got to chug beer. That's, I guess one way to pregame for the Super Bowl. But that means just me today. So I'm recording right now at 12:30. Wanted to get this out of the way before the Super Bowl. It'll be kind of short and sweet. It's going to be abbreviated. I'm going to jump, we got the Riviera coming up next week, which is probably one of my favorite events of the year. Probably one of my favorite golf courses of the year. But I have in my article a lot of stuff about, the holes, some videos, some flybys that you can see. I'll briefly go over that, but I'll jump right into betting strategies. We'll get you in and out so you can enjoy your day. But I'm recording this right now during the final round of the Waste Management Phoenix Open. Got a lot of stuff on the oven right now. It could be a really, really good day for me, or it could be a really bad day. We'll see. Right now, I got Scheffler. I take on Scheffler from pre-tournament. I don't really feel all that good about it, though. We'll see. I also have Xander, who, man, that 3-hole stretch where he just couldn't hit a putt. I really hope that doesn't come back to burn him, but he's still in the mix. Same to Tony Finau. He's 5 back. He hasn't really gotten the putter that going all that much this tournament. Maybe he can do it. And then all these books are throwing some free bets my way. I kind of sprinkled a little bit on some chasers, including Rahm. Just a little play. I had a little bit of free bet put on Spieth. He seems like he's doing pretty good. I had a conversation with Jeff Nagel for a tournament. Going back and forth about Spieth. We'll see. Maybe he's right. And then Sung JM too. Apparently everybody's on Sung JM. I figured why not? I had a free bet. Throw it to a 25-1 for tonight. So we'll see what happens. Got a bunch of positionals too. Could be a really, really good day. I've enjoyed the tournament so far though. No complaints about the coverage at all. I think actually CBS has done a really nice job, especially yesterday too. Just not only covering the tournament, but kind of getting a lot of the atmosphere involved and not spending too much time on some of the hoopla, but just enough to kind of get you energized. And I really liked it. I thought the course looks great. I love how 11's playing. I was actually joking with Boston Capper about how if we ever went to Phoenix, we wouldn't spend any time at 16. I think we would just sit behind the tee box on 11 and just bet on guys if they're going to go in the water or not. Because that's always fun. Pretty much every ball that went down the left side was going in. A lot of a pretty fun hole. Same thing with number 12 too. A lot of really good car crashes, especially the hot mic with JT telling his ball to sit and then telling it to F off once it went in. That was great. I feel really bad for the guy on PGA Tour Live running the dump button because it was rough. It seemed like there was a lot of F-bombs going on in the crowd and with the golfers too. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully it goes my way. Hopefully I'm not miserable going to the Super Bowl tonight. It would be nice to hit an outright and a bunch of positionals. And, so we'll see what happens. But why don't we get right to the Genesis Invitational. But before we do that, let's talk about WynnBET. So WynnBET is the official online sportsbook of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. WynnBET is active in a bunch of states, and there are a ton of ways to win, including live betting and same-game parlays, aka WynnBET's Build Your Own Bet. Yeah, great promos, odds, and payouts are happening right now on WynnBET. So are you ready to play? Sign up today to receive a special offer. Bet $100, get $100. Limited state availability. If you're watching right now, take advantage of that deal. Put a little bit on the Super Bowl. You're not going to regret it. And of course, if you hit the biggest long shot parlay of the week, you get $1,000 free credit. There's so much to choose from. All you have to do is head over to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WynnBET so they know we sent you at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/WYNNBET. Offer subject to change. Terms and conditions at WynnBET.com. Must be 21 or older and present in the state where play through WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700. Okay. Before I get to Genesis, though, feel like I kind of got to talk about a little bit what happened last week. If you saw this preview, it got a little contentious with Boston Capper and I've gotten some feedback too on that show. I wasn't really proud of what happened. I guess a couple things I want to say. First of all, there's no animosity between me and Capper. We're fine. We talk every day. It just, listen, sometimes when you talk to somebody a lot and you do a show, sometimes you get each other's nerves. It happens, but there's no animosity between us. And I think sometimes, on this show, there can be perceived animosity. There isn't. We just like to bust each other's balls. Maybe it comes off a little rougher than I think, so maybe I got to watch it. But I mean, there's only been really 2 times I've been gotten mad at him. One was last week, which was a big blow up. And then a couple weeks ago, I got mad at him for jumping on my point about Cam Davis. I didn't like that. So, but I guess we're fine. I grew up listening to a lot of talk radio growing up, and animosity was usually a good thing. So I thought maybe a little animosity, if we kind of get at each other, actually might be entertaining. And apparently it's not. So I'll try and be a little better in that. And then I apologize for any coverage takes. I think I've just, going forward, only positives that I'll talk about, because I'm not adding anything to the conversation if I rip around the coverage. We all know it. It can be better on certain channels. CBS is great. Comcast, we'll see. But only positive things going forward. So, and just trying to be a little positive in general. Like sometimes I come to this show and listen, like, this is not my full-time job. I have a day job. I got a young kid. This last year, there's been a couple things in my life that has been a little stressful. I had to step away from the show, to handle something. And, listen, like sometimes I come in this, on this show and I'm a little stressed out. I try not to let it bleed out. Sometimes it goes through the microphone. So I'll be a little more cognizant going forward about that. Keep it positive, because you guys don't really care about my problems. You really care about me helping you make money. So why don't we do that? Why don't I help you make money? So we are going to the Genesis Invitational. This is another elevated event. 23 of the top 25 players in the world are here. The only ones who aren't here are the guys on Live. Cameron Smith and defending champion Joaquin Neiman. I am very fond of Joaquin Neiman based on him cashing a 75-1 ticket for me last year at this event. It's kind of sucks that he's went over to Live. He ended up finishing, I think, 5th at the Oman Open. So congratulations on Super Bowl weekend and, with the Phoenix Open, probably the most fun tournament on the PGA Tour. You're over in Oman. I hope your bank account is really good. But the big fish coming here is Tiger Woods. He's back. This is his first official PGA Tour event, not counting the majors, that he's here. I mean, it's kind of fitting that this is his comeback. I mean, obviously, this is his tournament. His foundation is a big part of the Genesis Invitational. But this is about the 2-year anniversary since that car wreck. I mean, remember, he went to Riviera, and he looked just completely zoned out. I don't know if it was his medications or what, but he was clearly not doing well. He looked tired and fatigued. And then a couple days later, I think he was heading over to maybe Bel Air Country Club to do a spot with, I think, David Spade, which is pretty random. But he ended up getting in the car accident. Obviously, it was awful. Listen, at this point, you've heard me on this show. I'm not the biggest Tiger fanboy. I just appreciate his game. I don't get caught up in the hoopla or drink the Kool-Aid like a lot of people do. I just appreciate him playing, no matter what happens. I just want him happy. And if he wants to show up here and be happy, if he makes the cut, that'll be great. I don't expect him to contend at all, but if he makes the cut, maybe squeeze out a top 30 finish. It's good for the game of golf. It's always good when he's involved. So that's somebody to watch. You'll probably get a lot of Tiger, on your screens, which is probably a good thing. So, all right, let's talk about Riviera. Obviously, like I mentioned, not going to go too deep into the course itself. There's a great video from Golf Digest going over each hole that I posted on the article this week. I linked to an article from Andy Johnson, the Fried Egg. He goes in a lot more details about each hole, why Riviera is great. I guess for me, it started some things I really like about the course. I mean, obviously you got the opening stretch, number 1 and number 2. Basically 2 holes that are par 4.5. I mean, that first hole, you're teeing up 80 feet above the fairway. It's par 5. If you don't come away with birdie on that hole, you're losing about half a stroke to the field, but then you turn right back and play the toughest hole in the golf course, 471 yards, back into the wind. It's a tricky hole too. it plays with your depth perception. There's a bunker on the left side there that looks like it's right next to the green. It's actually not. It's about 40 yards behind it. There's a couple holes like that on this golf course where, it just doesn't look visually appealing to you and it makes you uncomfortable. Number 2 is like that. I love the par 3s though. I think that's probably my favorite part of Riviera is these 4 par 3s. They all have unique characteristics about it, but they're all really, really, really good. Number 4, it's a Redan green. Again, another hole with an optical illusion. Basically, there's a bunker. It plays uphill. There's a bunker on the right that's about 30 yards short. But because there's a large area of shaved off grass around the green, it looks like it's right next to the green. It's not. Green is very fast. It runs hard from back or front to back and left and right to left. There's a giant bunker right until left there, so you can't really carry. The best way to probably get close to the hole is probably hitting a soft fade and letting the slope kind of funnel the ball back to the green. If you try and hit a draw, I mean, yeah, you can get it close to the pin, but it's probably going to run through the green, and then you got kind of a tough chip back up the hill. Number 6, you got the pot bunker right in the middle of the green. You've seen a lot of guys if they hit it long and the pin's up in front, trying to figure out how to navigate around that green or around the bunker to try to get it close. Number 14, it's a big green, but that's a green that slopes really hard from right to left too. Really tough to putt on. It's got some front bunkers up. It's got some bunkers up in front too that if you do land in it, it's tough up and down because of how hard the green slopes. Number 16 too, tiny, tiny green surrounded on all sides by bunkers. It reminds me a little bit of like one of those tabletop down at Ross greens with, you got the green here falls off, bunkers, short, well beneath the putting surface. Really solid par 3s. And then obviously you got number 10. Guys don't really, unless your name is Justin Thomas, you don't lay up on that hole anymore. You kind of hit it as close to the green as possible, trying to get up and down. They've also, kind of trick up that green a little bit to make it a little firm, kind of challenge these guys. Overall though, love Riviera. If you want any more detail on it, go to my article, look at the video and the link to the John's website. I definitely recommend reading it. So betting strategies though, it's why you're here. What should you focus on this week? So why don't we get into a little bit about Riviera, just from a, fact standpoint, statistics standpoint, we'll go from there. So Riviera Country Club, it's par 71, plays a little over 7,300 yards long. So the yardage. So this is Kikuyu grass in the fairways and rough. Kikuyu is a very sticky grass, very spongy grass. It's native to Africa, actually. And back in the 30s, Riviera was resodded with Kikuyu after a New Year's Eve storm. It's sticky. It's native to Africa. It's at Torrey Pines, but when you see the farmers, it's actually not there because it's overseas at that time. But at Riviera, it's still warm enough where it can sustain itself. It doesn't go dormant like Bermuda does. And sometimes if you find your ball in the rough at the Kikuyu, even though it's only 2 inches deep at Riviera, it can be really inconsistent. Sometimes it's because it's a dense grass, it can sit up so you can get really nice contact of the ball. But if it sinks to the bottom, that's going to be really tough to hack out of because it just grabs the club, can't control the face. It's going to go everywhere. Greens are Poa annua. So we've seen some Poa annua golf courses the last couple weeks, Pebble Beach, Torrey Pines. These are Poa annua greens. These are really slick greens, really fast. And because of how undulated and firm these greens are, you're going to see guys putting really defensively this week. We'll get to the skill set chart, but it takes a little bit of skill out of it because even with the best putters, you got to be really, really careful. It's hard to be aggressive on these greens and really go for it. You got to just be, kind of, tiptoe your way around some of these greens and, make sure you don't 3-putt. Par 71 only has 3 par 5s, but each par 5 presents a little bit of a challenge to itself. The first, obviously, it's one of the easiest par 5s on the PGA Tour, but you have to birdie it. And it's not a guaranteed birdie. Yeah, it's only like 510 yards. It's pretty much just a short iron to the green. But if you're in that front bunker there, depending where the pin is, it's not a very easy up and down. You've also seen guys, hit it a little hot through the green. Again, not a very easy up and down. If you're not making birdie that hole, you're really going to lose strokes. The 11th is probably my least favorite hole in the golf course. It's dead straight. It's right next to the end of the driving range, but it's flanked on both sides by huge rows of eucalyptus trees. It's reachable if you're in the fairway, but if you're in the eucalyptus, trees, you're probably hacking out. it doesn't really fit Riviera. It seems like it's a means to an end to get to the edge of the property so that most of the back nine can go back into the wind all the way from hole 12 to hole 16, which is a really solid stretch of golf. But it seems like this 11th hole is kind of just jammed in there to get to that point. I don't really love it. I wish they would probably cut down the trees, maybe do a little something with it. But listen, I don't know Riviera. I am just here talking to you on a Sunday. And then the 17th, that's a tough par 5. It's uphill. You got the wind helping you, but there's some cross bunkers you got to navigate with off the tee. There's a cross bunker short of the green that you basically have to carry in order to get on it. It's a really tough green to putt on. It's undulated. If you miss the green, it's hard to get up and down. Not an easy par 5. So, it collectively, because of the first, it's fairly easy scoring par 5s, but each one has a different challenge. Let's talk about scoring though. So Riviera is usually one of the harder golf courses on the PGA Tour. You can see it. I mean, sometimes we've seen tournaments where only 8 under, 9 under wins. Last year was 17 under. There wasn't a whole lot of wind. I think they got maybe a little bit of rain too before the tournament. I actually asked a podcast friend Andy Lack what the weather was lately, because as you guys might have heard, there was a lot of rain at the end of last year in California. Hasn't rained in 2 weeks. Course should be firm. No concerns. It'll be basically just like the tougher Riviera we've seen. It's really going to come down to how the wind is, and that's where the scoring is. Like sometimes it can play under par at Riviera or close to it. It's not a birdie fest, but when the wind is up though, with how firm that place is, it can be a nightmare. So while the par 5s, as I just mentioned, a little easier than PGA Tour average, or actually one of the easiest ones. The par 4s, though, they are the second toughest on the PGA Tour. Only of all tournaments with at least 5 tournaments since 2015. Only Torrey Pines and Bay Hill have a harder collection of par 4s. So, listen, you're going to play 13 par 4s overall, third toughest on the PGA Tour. That's why your scoring is up. So what makes Riviera really tough to play on? Well, first is off the tee. And of all golf tournaments with at least 5 tournaments since 2015, Riviera ranks the 6th toughest off the tee. And it's not necessarily because of the rough or, the width of the fairways. In fact, the fairways are actually kind of generous at Riviera. But they're really difficult to hold. As I mentioned, this is a very firm golf course. A lot of these fairways are canted. If you miss just in a little bit of the wrong spot, it'll, run off into, the rough or something. So the average driving accuracy rate of the field since 2015 is 52%. That is the lowest clip of all golf courses with at least 5 tournaments since 2015. So to give you an idea how low that is, I think Winged Foot for the 2020 US Open, the one that Bryson won, I think it was only 48% that week. So like when you only got about a 50-50 chance to hit the green or hit the fairway, it's tough. And it's not very visually appealing off the tee too. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of ways that George Thomas and through the years, Tom Fazio, Bill Corr, and Crenshaw, when the work they've done to it, there's a lot of optical illusions, a lot of ways you can really mess with your depth perception off the tee. And once the ball hits the ground, you don't really know where it's going to go. So that makes for a lot of really uncomfortable tee shots. It does present some options though. If you want to be aggressive, you can take on the bunkers. You just got to hit a really, really good shot, or there's opportunities where you got to club down too. It's also a tournament too, or a golf course where you got to hit it both ways off the tee. And the perfect example is number 12 and number 13. Number 12, it commands a draw. Basically, it's a dog-leg left. You got to hook it around the trees. Now, most guys can do it now with a 3-wood, but still it's something you got to execute. And then the very next hole, you got to hit a fade. It goes right the other way. And there's a lot of holes like that based on where the cross bunkering is, the direction of the holes. You see a guy like Bubba Watson. He's won here, I think, 3 times now. That's a guy who off the tee shapes his ball probably the best of anybody I've ever seen. Like there's some crazy shots you've seen from him at Riviera. I think his last victory too, just this marvelous, like sweeping, just draw or fade he hit into, I think one of the holes too. Just like a guy with a lot of creativity off the tee. has done well here. So yeah, off the tee, it can be very challenging. Command you hit a lot of shots, in order to execute it. If not, it's not easy to get close to the pin, which is there's a lot of very few opportunities to do that though. But even though it does have tougher driving conditions, there's very little penalty to hitting an approach shot into a green from either the fairway or rough. And what do I mean by that? Well, Data Golf, they measure this stat based on how much of a penalty is it to hitting approach shots from the rough versus the fairway. So basically, they take all the shots, using shot like data, and they measure everyone's total strokes gained from that point on. And it's the least penalizing golf course on the PGA Tour for hitting out of the rough or fairway into approach shot. That's not necessarily these are really easy approach shots. They're not. With how fast and firm these greens are and how undulated they are, how tucked some of these pins are. Getting these pins are really difficult. It's not like the rough either is all that penal either. It's, listen, hitting out the cues, if it's buried, it can be rough. Like it can grab the club face, but you can do it. I think why it's not penal though is more to do with the fact of how the golf course is designed. So let me explain what I mean by that. So Riviera, especially where the pin is on the green, you have to be on the correct side of the fairway or in the rough in order to have a great angle. If you basically are out of position, even if you're in the fairway or the rough and you just don't have a very good look at the pin, let's say pin is back left and on the left side of the green, there's a giant, there's a swale or a mound right in the green. There's a bunker. You have a really terrible angle to the pin. It doesn't really matter if you're in the rough or the fairway. You're probably not getting close to the pin. And chances are, unless you hit a really small landing zone, you're probably going to end up in the same position, either off the green or the same area of the green as you would hit from the rough or the fairway. So I think that's why what it means is that it's the least penal golf course. And it's more the fact that if you're going to miss the fairway, at least miss it on the correct side of it. So you at least have still a look to the pin. And overall too, the green regulation rate at Riviera is really tiny. When you have about half your shots, if you're field average, about half your shots, your approach shots coming from the rough, not going to give a lot of spin on it. These are really firm greens. You're going to miss a lot of greens. So the green regulation rate of Riviera is only about 56% since 2015. And that's the lowest rate of all golf courses with at least 5 events since 2015. There's a couple others that have had 1 or 2 events that are lower. I think the Renaissance Club is one, mostly because of last year. But overall, though, just consistently year in, year out, really low rates of hitting the green in regulation because greens are firm. You're hitting out of the rough a lot of it. Even if you're in the fairway, if you're on the wrong side of it, it's hard to get close to the pin. It can easily run off, the green. Let's talk about around the green too. So the bunkers are really tough at Riviera to play out of. Only in the stadium course at PGA West features tougher bunkers to try and get up and down from. Again, of all tournaments with at least 5 tournaments, or all events with at least 5 tournaments since 2015. Again, a lot of them sit well below the putting surface. How the greens are undulated and how quick they are. You really need to have precise spin and just good control of the ball coming out of the bunker in order to get close to it. And, that's why, if you're a bad bunker player, now, granted, Victor Hovland has done very well here in 2 appearances. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about why exactly he's good here. But in general, though, if you're pretty good coming out of bunkers at this place, you got good control. You can do well. You see it a couple times this thing, like at number 10. If you're short side and the pins in the back, you've seen guys ping pong back and forth between bunkers. I mentioned hole number 16 or hole number 14 too. If you're one of those bunkers, it's really tough to get up and down from because of how severely sloped some of those greens are. So you got to be really good coming out of these bunkers. If not, you're probably going to have a tough time getting it down for par. And then let's talk about the greens. So like its West Coast counterparts, these are Poana greens. They're very quick too. So between the quickness and the Poana, it's very difficult to read the putts. So only Torrey Pines has tougher putts under 5 feet on the PGA Tour, and only Torrey Pines, Pebble Beach, and Augusta National are tougher to putt on between 5 and 15 feet. Torrey Pines and Pebbles because of the POA. Augusta National, very fast, slick, undulating greens, much like Riviera. That's why you see a lot of crossover between success at Riviera and success here. Bubba, Dustin Johnson, Adam Scott, just to name a few. So, all right, let's go over the relative skill set chart. Kind of an interesting chart from Riviera, more so about what it doesn't suggest versus what it suggests. So let's talk about off the tee. So according to Data Golf, it says that there's a very low correlation between guys who are pretty accurate off the tee and 9. It almost seems like it's actually more of a benefit towards guys who miss a lot of fairways. And that makes sense for a couple of reasons. First, I just mentioned that the driving accuracy rates are really low. It's hard to hold fairways. So if everybody's in the rough, then it doesn't really matter. So you're in basically the same position that maybe at other events you'd be at a disadvantage than those guys. Even if you're one of the most accurate players on the PGA Tour, holding these fairways are tough because not everything is right out in front of you. You can't just hit the ball dead straight like your Kevin Kisner runs a mile. The fairways run out. It'll go into a bunker. It takes a lot of that away. It also says that it basically has the same amount of, in terms of driving distance, has the same amount of advantage being long or not as a normal PGA Tour event. But you notice the last couple of years with some of these winners, Joaquin Niemann last year, really elite drivers, got some length to him too. Adam Scott, really good drivers, got some length, good combination of length and accuracy as well. Dustin Johnson, Bubba Watson, really good drivers. JB Holmes even. So it seems like maybe the fact that, like, according to Data Golf, no big advantage for being long or not than any other typical stop might have something to do with the fact of how some of these winners were back in the early 2010s. Like Steve Stricker won here. Bill Haas won here. John Merrick won here. I don't think James Hahn is really all that special of a driver either. And all those guys won. But as drivers and equipment has gotten more advanced and you're able to control the ball a little more than you might have done back in 2010, you can be a little more aggressive at this place and carry some of the trouble a little more. So I think for me, I think even though this chart doesn't suggest that, it's a benefit to be long or not, I think I'm probably leaning more towards guys who are pretty good off the tee, like in the stroke gain categories, and leaning more towards distance. It seems like that's more the trend the last like 5 or 6 years. Approach play, basically the same as any other event on the PGA Tour. I mean, obviously, being a good iron player, it helps. There are examples of guys, though, that might not be as strong in the iron categories just because they're really good around the green. And that brings me to my next point. Because the green regulation rate is so low here, there is a very high correlation of guys who are really good around the green and really good at Riviera. And I've talked about a couple of ways it is because of how fast and undulating and quick some of these greens are, especially coming out of some of these bunkers. You see guys over and over and over be really, really strong around the green and then winning at this place. I remember last year, one of the reasons why I like Joaquin Niemann was because his around the green game was really improving. That used to be a real disaster, but his last like 5, 6, 7, or 8 tournaments, he was starting to scramble pretty well. Ends up coming out and winning. Bubba Watson, pretty good and creative around the green. Dustin Johnson, pretty good around the green too. Max Homa, when he won, decent around the green. So, if you're somebody that is targeting someone who's not very good around the green, namely, I can think of Colin Morikawa and Victor Hovland. Both those guys are struggling around the green at Riviera, and they still did well because they were just premium ball strikers. That can be able to overcome it. But if you're not a very good iron player, if you're picking someone who's not a very good iron player and pretty poor around the green, like that's immediate cross off pretty much for me. But around the green is definitely something is really important this week. There's a huge correlation of guys who have a lot of success at Riviera that are good from that area. And then putting, there's actually a slightly less of a correlation between guys who are typically good putters and guys who isn't. I think I'm more concerned this week with guys who just have experience putting on West Coast POA. I believe Bubba Watson's also won at Torrey Pines. Dustin Johnson's won at Pebble Beach and then won here. Max Homa has won on the West Coast. So guys who have had success on POA, I'm valuing more than just good putters in general because This is a golf course where you do have to putt a little defensively. If you're good on the Poana, in other locations on the West Coast, I'm going to value it. Like, be careful too. If you're someone that uses a lot of these golf databases, if you're using Poana, make sure it's only the West Coast stuff. The East Coast Poana, it's a little different. Like, you see when you watch Torrey Pines or Pebble, ball kind of bumps a little bit. Same thing here. Last thing, let's talk about the approach shot distribution chart. Pretty defined. So about 49% about half your shots are going to come between 150 and 200 yards. A lot of longer approach shots from, on your par fours. I know number 14 is 190 yards. Number 6 is 160 yards. So that falls into that bucket too. Number 16, I think, is like 175. So a lot of your approach shots are going to come from that range. Especially, it's important too with these par threes because how tough they are. Basically, try and just get out of there with the par. You got to be good from that range. So combining with 125 to 150, which is less than your average amount of shots than your typical PGA Tour average. If you take between 125 and 200 this week, it's going to cover about 65% of your shots. That's a pretty large sample size. And then after that, from over 200, it's about 25%. So those are probably your par fives. Technically, I guess your approach shot on number 10 is your drive. Number 4 is also over 200 yards. So, but it's only about 25% of your total shots. And then under 125, it's only about 11%. Don't worry about your short iron wedge game this week. Those are really the approach shot distribution charts you really should, or buckets to look at. So with your scoring stats, your proximity stats, focus primarily on between 125 and 200. That'll get you most of what you need. If you're going to weight more 150 to 200 though. But don't forget about 125 to 150. It's still about 1 in 7 shots you hit. So about 2.5 per round. Don't forget about those either. Throw it in your model. Just don't weight it as heavily. So just overall, just to summarize what I'm looking for this week at Riviera. Past success at Riviera is always a plus. This is one of the tournaments where usually guys who are pretty good annually at this stop are usually pretty good, bets to make. So course history is pretty good here to, especially putting on these West Coast Poana greens. That's a plus. I am going to look for good drivers. I think the trend the last 5 or 6 years of just guys who are really good in stroke skiing off the tee and mostly do it because of their distance. Those are guys I'm going to shade more towards. If you're a shorter hitter, you still can do well here, but you got to have a really good short game. Maybe you're a good iron player from 150 to 200 as well. That'll be what I still consider, or maybe you got really good POA history, but I do think just based on, the guys who won this thing and just overall the best players on the PGA Tour are generally just really good drivers, kind of like what we're seeing at Phoenix. I think that's probably where I'm going to shade most of my bets towards. Players who excel between 150 and 200 yards, like I just talked about, really good scramblers too. That's by far the most correlated trait of all guys who have been really good at Riviera. If you're not a really good scrambler, you got to give me a really good reason why. Either you're just an elite iron player. That's primarily it. I mean, you're Hovland and Morikawa's. If you're not a really good scrambler off the tee, or really good scrambler, I don't really care so much about the off the tee stuff. Well, I do. That's actually, scratch that. Okay. I've been rambling for a little bit. So if you follow those tips, you're probably going to put together a pretty good betting card and DFS lineup. So that's it. We'll be back tomorrow to go over DFS for Riviera. As far as an official Super Bowl pick, I know I said on the show on Tuesday I was going to pick the Chiefs. I am, after looking at the numbers, because I hadn't really done much yet, I think I'm going to join the crowd on everybody. Everybody seems to be on the Eagles. I think I'm going to join them too. I just think they have a better roster. They have a better team. I am concerned about Jalen Hurts. I don't think he's looked particularly good since he's come back from the shoulder injury. But between all the big names they have on defense and their weapons and how well they run the ball, and also too, listen, whether you like it or not, the Eagles have some sort of chip on their shoulder, even though they've won a Super Bowl and won a bunch of division titles, and they're not really the underdog, but they create a lot of narratives to make them seem like the underdog. Maybe the fact that Pat Mahomes got the MVP when Jalen Hurts probably should have been. He would have been the MVP if he didn't get hurt. Maybe Sirianni will use it. And just as for the Chiefs, listen, Mahomes is great. But just outside of Kelsey, I'm not scared of any of their offensive threats. And, you know, I think their defense can be had, especially in between the hashes too. It seems like they can, you know, the Eagles can run either Goddard up the seam or A.J. Brown crossing patterns a lot today. I think the Eagles are going to win. I think it'll be close for most of the game, but Eagles cover, obviously. Eagles win. So Eagles money line for me. That's my official pick. So we'll be back tomorrow to go over DFS for Riviera. Good luck with your bets at Phoenix. Hopefully it goes well for me. Hopefully it goes well for you. Good luck with your Super Bowl bets, and we'll talk to you tomorrow night.